You put a rabbit in a vacuum, it dies. You put a plant in a vacuum, it dies. You put them together, they thrive. So ageless body is Brahmand and timeless mind is Brahman. Right now, the world is the victim of the hypnosis of social conditioning.
Absolutely.
Where we have confused ourselves with our selfies.
When the real outcome matches the expectations that we have, then we are joyful. Is there a simple formula of joy and happiness that you would conform to?
Happiness is always for a reason. There is a formula for happiness. Here it is. H is equal to S plus C plus V.
But if you make things simple, do you think people have a natural inclination not to take it seriously?
Simple is elegant. Simplicity is stupid.
Have you ever written in your prescription that how often sex is important in a love relationship?
In my opinion or my experience, and I don't need to defend it, it's called power mongering, influence peddling, cronyism, and corruption.
Welcome to Duologue, Dr. Chopra.
Thank you, Barun.
It's a great pleasure and honor to have you on the set.
My privilege.
Heard about you possibly since I was born or I was growing up. And it's a long-awaited meeting for me. You know, when I was reading your books, saw some of your interviews and interactions, I could connect with them. Many times I could connect with them. But then I was losing out somewhere in between while connecting the dots. So today I will try and do that. To start with, Doctor, your first book, Ageless Body, Timeless Mind, 30 years back you've written it. If today you had to rewrite that book, would the title change in today's context?
It would not. Ageless body refers to our true body. Normally, when you think of the body, you think of this. And then you call everything else the universe. But the air is your breath. The rivers and waters are your circulation. The earth is recycling as your body. And the atoms in your body were forged in the crucible of burning stars. So you have a personal body, and then you have a universal body, and they're both equally yours. You put a rabbit in a vacuum, it dies. You put a plant in a vacuum, it dies. You put them together, they thrive. So ageless body is Brahmand and timeless mind is Brahman. And we don't need to revise that.
We don't need
ancient.
All right. Where I came from, let me tell you, I think our priorities change, right? According to the time that we live in. And I always have been saying this, that I think the time that you've written this book, which is 1993, post that the time that we're living now, according to me, we are living in two different worlds. And that primarily has happened due to digitization, internet, mobile penetration. I'll give you a simple example. I was talking to my colleagues and I said that just go through your mobile and the messages last 24 hours and see how many variety of subjects and topics that you have addressed. It could be your daughter not keeping well, to your son's school, to the challenges that you have in your workplace, to your parents' ailment. And therefore, like if I have to look at my body today, much before that, I have a mind which is absolutely restless, wandering in all directions, never stable on something specific. That's where I thought that I do have to look at my body because we've grown up understanding that a healthy mind can reside only in a healthy body. But today I feel somewhere the mind plays the primary role because that healthy mind, it's very difficult for us to keep that mind healthy.
So the mind is never healthy. It cannot be. By definition, the mind is vacillating between pleasure and pain, between joy and suffering, between experiences that are necessary through contrast. You can't have an up without a down. You can't have a hot without a cold. And the mind is constantly vacillating. Also, the mind is conditioned by society, by economic conditioning, religious conditioning, cultural conditioning. So the mind is a bondage. There's no such, to say peace of mind is an oxymoron. Mind is never at peace. You have to go to a deeper level, which we call awareness, or fundamental reality, where you see that mind and body are entangled sensations. The mind is the sensation of thought, feelings, emotions, imagination, and the body is a perceptual activity. So normally you think of the body as a noun, like this. But this is not. If you say, I have a body, which one are you talking about? Fertilized egg, zygote, embryo, baby, toddler, teenager, mature adult. So, we have to get rid of the idea that the body is an independent entity. It's a perceptual activity, and it correlates with the mind. They're two just like space and time are one thing, just like mass and energy are one thing, body and mind are one entity, and they're regulated by a deeper level of awareness. Now, in spiritual traditions, they call that the soul. But in cognitive psychology, you don't need to use those words in trance. There is a level of awareness which is totally independent of the body and mind. That's where fundamental reality is. That's where self-regulation is. That's where joy is.
You just talked about conditioning, which is tradition. According to me, one of the biggest causes of stress today is to put up with that tradition, the pressure of tradition, pressure of conditioning. We all have been conditioned in a particular way to live our life in the society. So we'll come to that. That's according to me, one of the biggest stresses that we deal with. Now, whereas I come from an industry, which is what I've done for my living, where I communicate. Whatever you are saying, the takers need to understand. Takers need to accept it, and then they need to apply it in their lives. Otherwise, it just remains in the book. So which is where I think is the challenge of today. That how do I get those restless minds to bring their focus into something that you're saying, that, hey, this is what you need to adopt, this is what you need to practice, this is the awareness that you need to delve into. That's the biggest challenge. And I jokingly say to my team when I talk to them that I'm working on a 6.75% chance because whatever being communicated to someone, 50% of that is not heard. Whatever is heard, 50% of that is not understood. Whatever is understood, 50% of that is not remembered. And then whatever is remembered, only 50% of that is applied. So that's a metaphorically saying something. But I see that is the biggest enemy. That is the biggest state of affairs, which I think we need to focus on in today's time. That how do I get this wandering mind coming on across the table, talking to someone, listening to things that people like you, luminaries like you have to say?
Well, I think right now the world is the victim of the hypnosis of social conditioning.
Absolutely.
Where we have confused ourselves with our selfies.
You just took the words from my mouth and put it in a lovely
So I grew up reading Rabindranath Tagore, and I actually did some translations in contemporary language of his work and his life. I saw his interactions with Einstein, and to me Tagore was the ultimate example of a person who was not only a literary giant, but in a way a rishi.
A philosopher.
He would sit in the boat and look at the sunset for hours, or sometimes just sit there quietly doing nothing. And he wrote the most extraordinary, visionary poetry of, I think, the century, for which he got the Nobel Prize. This was a time when people were, Tagore said that I exist is a perpetual surprise. He was surprised by existence and awareness of existence, full of wonder, innocence, adventure, mystery, vision, creativity, intuition, insight, imagination. We've lost that. And this is the tragedy of our times, this restless mind.
Yes.
But if we go back to basics, humor, awareness, meditation, mindfulness, dharana, dhyan, samadhi. This is India's gift to the world. And that is the only cure for the restless mind.
Do you think that when you say something very simply, like I say, I'm trying to create something in that line, which is objectifying subjectivity. If you make something very simple, like for instance, you said joy, you said happiness. I often ask myself that, how do you define happiness? And I try. Tell me whether I'm wrong or right, because I try and convert almost everything in a kind of a mathematical formula so that it's very easy for me to comprehend and understand and communicate. So I asked myself that what is happiness or joy? So just as an example, I said that when the real outcome in our life exceeds or matches the expectations that we have, then we are joyful and happy. Is there a simple formula of joy and happiness that you would conform to?
Yes, there's a difference between joy and happiness. So happiness is always for a reason. And if the reason is taken away from you, you'll become sad. So happiness and sadness go together. They're complementarities. Joy is independent of both happiness and sadness. So when you talk about formula, actually, there is a formula for happiness that has been created by social scientists. And here it is. H is equal to S plus C plus V. So H stands for happiness. S stands for set point in the brain. The set point is determined by your attitude. Is life a problem or is life an opportunity? That's 50% of your happiness experience is just the set point. And that's influenced by your childhood. You know, if your parents were always happy, looking for opportunities, you have a happiness set point. And if your parents were always complaining, condemning, criticizing, playing the victim, then the set point is for unhappiness, 50%. So H is equal to S plus C. C is conditions of living, primarily money. That is about 10 to 12% of your happiness experience on a daily basis, but only 10 to 12%. So if you win the lottery and you're very poor and now you're a multi-billionaire, you'll be happy, very happy, ecstatic. But in 6 months, you'll reach a plateau. In 1 year, you'll get back to your set point. In 5 years, you might be more miserable because you're worried about taxes and all kinds of investments, and it becomes your identity. You confuse self-worth with net worth. So that contributes about 10%. H is equal to S plus C plus V. V is voluntary choices we make every day. So there are two kinds of choices we make every day. One is for personal pleasure, alcohol, entertainment, sex, food, shopping. Do those choices make us happy? Yes, transiently, for about a few days. But then you have to repeat them to be happy again. And if you have an addictive personality, then pleasure becomes an addiction. You can't get enough of what you don't want anymore. But there's another kind of choice we can make, and that's called fulfillment. That comes when you have meaning and purpose in your life, when you're in your dharma, but also if you know how to make other people happy. In fact, the fastest way to be happy is to make somebody else happy. And you do that by giving them attention, which means deep listening, affection, deep compassion and caring, appreciation, noticing their uniqueness, and acceptance, radical acceptance, not trying to change people. That's the happiness formula.
Right. Let me just stay on this happiness formula.
But then we have joy is independent.
I will come to joy. You talked about H equal to S plus C
plus V.
Plus V. Now, one thing that had happened with the social scientist equation, that they've detached mind from it, that they've detached self from it, they've detached, so which is where my happiness formula is coming to. My happiness formula is exactly H is equal to or greater than equal to R minus E. E is my expectation, R is the reality. But if you make things simple, do you think people have a natural inclination not to take it seriously? Like, have you watched the movie Anand? One of my most favorite movies, Amitabh Bachchan. So there one dialogue was that there, if I say a common cold, nobody would take me seriously. That this is serious disease. I have to say lymphosarcoma of the nose, and then people will start taking me seriously, taking my illness seriously.
Simple is elegant. Simplicity is stupid. So there's
simplicity moves into stupidity.
Yeah.
Right.
So
it can be
there's a
misconstrued.
distinction between simple and simplicity. And there's also a distinction between loneliness and solitude. So loneliness is a disconnect and solitude is a connect.
Or loneliness is imposed. Solitude is
optional. It's chosen. Yes.
Yeah.
So it's chosen. So there you are. But in any case, happiness is mental.
It's an expectation management.
It's an expectation.
So I say, when I say H equals reality minus 2 expectation.
It's true.
And I always say that reality is something that I can't manage always, but I can always manage my expectations. So I theoretically say that happiness is a choice.
Yeah, it's process-oriented instead of outcome. Pursue excellence, ignore success.
Ignore success. Brilliant. So coming back to joy. So that's an interesting thing. I've never put my mind to it. That what is the... I'll try and say it. Let's say this is the first time I'm hearing these two terms and trying to understand them in different perspectives. So happiness is often external, right? As I said.
Always.
Always external. So joy is internal. So I would not be dependent on any external expectation on reality as far as joy is concerned. So I can manufacture joy inside me. Is that what it is?
Joy is fundamental reality. It's called Ananda Shakti. And it leads to what is called Kriya Shakti and Ichha Shakti, which is the infinite organizing power of our fundamental reality, which is beyond mind and body, which we call Turiya or transcendence. It's a return to innocence. It's, again, curiosity, it's wonder, it's being comfortable with ambiguity, with contradiction, with paradox, with confusion, with uncertainty. When you are actually in touch with your deeper self, as a child is, you see a child before the child has been hypnotized into social constructs. A child is spontaneously joyful. A child is spontaneously affectionate. A child is spontaneously curious. A child is spontaneously full of wonder. A child spontaneously takes risks. A child falls down and then stands up again. So all you have to do is look at a child before the social programming begins. I was recently, during the COVID pandemic, I was in Orlando and I was taking the train, to the baggage claim. Everybody was stressed. There was a mother who was on the cell phone. Everybody was wearing masks and people were upset and screaming and unhappy. There was a little baby in the crib, just looking around. And finally he caught my eye and he gave the biggest smile in the world. And then he looked everywhere else, smiling. And in 2 minutes, the atmosphere in the entire train shifted because of spontaneous joy. That's fundamental. That's being surprised by existence. Tagore, that I exist is a perpetual surprise. If you're not surprised by your existence, your humanity is incomplete. So that's why children like to play peekaboo. They like to play hide and seek. They hide, but they also want to be found out. They're comfortable with ambiguity and surprise and confusion. That is joy, and it's our original state. And what we need now is a return to innocence through the elegance of simplicity without being simplistic.
Now, is that joy anyway in conflict of interest with the concept of karma? Because once you have given me an example of child, all those are the virtues of returning to childhood. But child is also a very, very selfish entity. As long as he gets his things settled, he's happy. He gets food, he gets care, he's happy. But how do I then return to joy? While I'll have to discharge my duties, I'll have to live my life, I'll have to make my ends meet. I've got bills to pay, or I've got lives to live. So how in the process I return to? Is that the self-awareness, meditation, etc. that you say?
You start with a simple question: am I joyful? And if the answer is no, you ask yourself, why not? And the only way to be joyful is to be aware in the present moment of the choices you're making. Am I making a choice that will create joy in me, joy in the people I interact with, and is the process joyful?
Tell me that if I'm going wrong anywhere, because joy, you said, is within internal, but I am in the context of my environment, right? Whether it is your loss, my gain, whether it is a zero-sum game, or it is a collective gain. I have certain perspective to that. I'll come to that. But let me tell you, this is what my route to joy is. This is what I want to, and often they're related, they're interconnected with happiness. These are all I'm thinking as I'm talking to you. You're instigating those thoughts in me. So as I live my life every day, so I try and see that I remain true to myself first, and to my duties, right? And then I'm an extremely cocky person, you might say, that I'm so proud of myself that I hate to lie. I don't think that I have done something which I need to hide from anyone. And then I believe, which is where the conflict, which I was saying, of joy, your joy is my sorrow or not, is that I live and let live. So do you think these three life principles of mine can combine to give me both joy and happiness?
Yeah, I think if you give up your need to be right, 95% of your life will change, because most of the time people are just trying to be right. They're trying to prove their point of view. So I think one principle, which would be very important, would be radical acceptance, understanding that everybody is doing their best from their level of awareness. And there's no need to prove your point of view. You have a point of view, but you don't need to prove it.
You can express just and let others whether take it or not, which is where I would personally think I often go wrong, because an individual is the same personality while he's at work and he moves into his personal life. I don't wear a mask and go into my personal life, and that is where the conflict comes. In an organizational setup, if I allow people to not to go by my views, then I run the risk of not meeting my organizational goals and objectives.
I don't think you lead by views, you lead by example.
Yeah, many times you can't lead by example, because if you are, I mean, ours is not a large company, let's say about 3,500 people. You can't lead by example all those 3,000 people. So you have to have systems and processes. You have to have your goals set up, and you have to have a review system, which is what we do as mundane corporate work. But then at some point in time, when there's a conflict of interest at work, I just can't let it be. I will have to, if I'm convinced, the way I do it, I hear everybody out. But finally, I take the decision because the onus lies on me. So if it goes wrong, I take the responsibility.
In my opinion or my experience, and I don't need to defend it, great leaders have shared vision. They accept maximum diversity. They know how to spiritually and emotionally bond with their teams. I don't even call them followers. And they lead by example, which means authenticity. They don't pretend to be who they're not. Integrity. They live up to their word. A higher calling, which is beyond selfish interests. And responsibility. When things go wrong, they take the blame. When things are right, they give credit to their team.
Absolutely.
That is good leadership.
Written in the book. I follow that to the T. So there's no, I mean, I don't think that there could be anything more right than this, than the sun rising from the east.
I use an acronym, LEADERS, LEADERS. So L stands for look and listen, with the mind, with the intellect, with the emotions, with the heart, and in stillness, and create a vision.
can I just go one by one? You let me know how do I react to that. And I'm asking you because this is a problem that I have faced, and I know that that's one of the problems in me. Listening is very important, but what if you've understood the thing and you are hard pressed against time? You still have to have the patience to hear the other person out, right?
I do.
So that's what.
Because if you don't listen, how would you know what the problem is?
So let's say you know the problem is, you know what the person is going to say. And you reconfirm by listening, but even while knowing it, you rather let the other person express.
There's a deeper level of listening that comes from silence that leads to more contextual relational process, where there's no win-lose orientation, where you eavesdrop on context, meaning, relationship, that actually enhances your vision. And that's the first step.
I would try and adopt that, Dr. Chopra.
The second step is E, emotional intelligence, which includes being in touch with your own emotions, being in touch with other people's emotions.
Like I personally feel that everybody who's working in and around me, their personal well-being is also a tacit responsibility that I carry. So if somebody walks into a meeting, I clearly observe and scan that person out and try and figure out that whether he or she is doing well or not.
Yeah, it's empathy, which you feel what the other person's feeling, but empathy by itself is not enough. You need compassion, which is the desire to alleviate suffering. And then you need love in action, which we call karma yoga. Love without action is meaningless.
Love is all about action, according to you.
Action without love is irrelevant. So you need both, love and action.
So fine. So coming back to LEA.
A is awareness. So most people act from the level of reactivity, nice and manipulative, stubborn and manipulative, nasty and manipulative, on and on. But it's ego-based awareness, so fight-flight response or ego-based manipulative response. Go to awareness beyond the conditioned mind, basically. That's A.
So that brings us to D.
D is dream and do it. So dream, you should always stretch more than you can reach. Otherwise, it's not a dream.
That's goal setting. I mean, I say that go set your goal for the moon, and somewhere in between you would
worthy goals. The progressive realization of worthy goals. Yes. So there...
That you're saying in a personal context or in an organizational context?
In an organizational context. And then you do have to do it. And there I use another acronym. It's called SMART goals. So S stands for stretch more than you can reach. M stands for make everything measurable.
Right, measurable.
A stands make sure your team is in agreement.
Acceptance and agreement.
R is keep a record. And T is set a time limit.
Brilliant. And that's the objectifying subjectivity I always search out for.
So that's
brilliant.
That's
smart. Thank you very much, Doctor.
Yeah, sure. That's D. Dream it and do it.
Right.
The next E stands for empowerment. You have to empower your team and not hog up all the power for yourself.
Absolutely.
And that is by giving people true self-esteem, by noticing their strengths, by authentically complimenting them on their strengths, not flattery, but noticing their strengths. And also to be relatively fearless, which means you take risks, calculated risks, not reckless risks. But if you don't break the mold of recycling conditioned thinking, you're never going to achieve anything.
Never going to achieve. You'll remain the same as it is.
So empower yourself and empower your team. Then R stands for responsibility, which includes physical, mental, spiritual well-being.
Which is what I have to delve into a little bit of spirituality with you.
I don't think any system of thought, including religion or science for that matter, or philosophy, can ultimately give you freedom, because it's still a system of human thought. If you really want access to reality, you have to go beyond thought. to the self, which is independent.
How do we do that? How do you go beyond thoughts? Because
Through yoga. True yoga. Raj Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, and Jnana Yoga.
so
There's
we
no
need
compromise.
to institutionalize these practices in an organization.
It's up to you. But
No, I'm saying that see, how do I make that as part of our culture? How do I make that being adopted by
as
everyone?
somebody who's worked for 40 years on well-being and corporate well-being and contributed to how well-being improves in institutions, we look at the following buckets of well-being. One is corporate well-being. Second is social well-being. Third is physical and emotional well-being. Fourth is community well-being. Fifth is financial well-being. And finally, spiritual well-being. There are criteria for each of these that are measurable. So, in an institution, if you ignore your employee, the rate of disengagement will go up by 40%. If you criticize them, it'll fall to 20% because people would rather be criticized than ignored. Now they exist. But if you notice a single strength authentically, the rate of disengagement falls to less than 1%. So there's lots of rules that you can employ to improve corporate well-being, including what I mentioned, shared vision, emotional bonding, maximum diversity, etc., etc. Then there's social well-being. Do you have family and friends that you can depend on, and can they depend on you? Then you have financial well-being, which hasn't anything to do with money, amount of money, but do you feel safe? Is your institution giving you insurance, disability, opportunities for learning and progress, and other things to make you financially secure?
That's right.
And financial security is not necessarily dependent on the amount of money, but actually the process of belonging to an ecosystem where everybody is helping each other and is there for each other. So that's financial well-being. Then there's community well-being. Community well-being means, are you safe in your community? If you lose your wallet, will somebody return it to you? Are you involved in community work, what we call seva, sangha, sadhana? And then there is beyond that something called spiritual well-being. So these are measurable. And when you measure well-being in institutions or in societies, you can predict everything, including hospital admissions, violence, social unrest, leadership quality. As part of the Gallup organization and creating these criteria for well-being, we've been able to look at countries and their well-being. Right now, Scandinavian countries are at the top for many reasons. India is not that high, by the way, on national well-being. And, when I was teaching at Kellogg Business School, this is now public knowledge, we were predicting the Arab Spring, we predicted the fall of Libya, etc. I was even had Gaddafi's son as a student because we had predicted that Libya was going to fall based on well-being statistics. And the State Department sent Gaddafi's son to my class, and he was actually brilliant even as a student. Then I was supposed to go to Libya after that, so to look at well-being and see how we could help. And within 3 weeks, I was unable to go because Gaddafi was dead and the son was dead, as predicted.
So you actually objectified subjectivity. You mathematically calculated from the well-being quotient.
Yes.
Things which are
you
going
can
to...
quantify well-being from 1 to 10. So 8, 9, and 10, you're thriving. 6 and 7, you're struggling. Less than 6, you're suffering.
So such a comfort zone for me. I now have a very clear understanding of the concept of well-being. I mean, you put a number to it, it becomes far easier for a person like me.
So if I ask you one question, how much energy you have to do everything you want to do, and you say 8, 9, 10, you're thriving.
Right.
You say 6 and 7, you're struggling. You say 5 or less, you already have a disease.
Now, coming back to the last one, S.
Synchronicity, meaningful coincidences. So as I've talked to leaders, and I've talked to a lot of leaders, including Mr. Mandela, including, some of the great leaders like Obama, Bill Clinton, many others, or corporate leaders, successful leaders in the business world. They say the usual things. I worked hard, I was ambitious, I went to the right school, had a good education. But in the end, they always say I was lucky, or they say I was in the right place at the right time, or many meaningful coincidences. Or if they're religious, they say God's grace, or whatever. But what they're talking about is something called synchronicity, which is a fundamental nature of reality where everything is entangled. And what I call good luck is opportunity meeting preparedness. So the opportunities are there all the time, but in the form of coincidences. Preparedness is not there. So people experience coincidences, but they don't jump on the opportunity. And that opportunity, that preparedness comes through self-awareness, which is my definition of spirituality, not a system of thought, not religion.
Brilliant. And I could again relate with those big leaders. I heard once I told my secretary the same thing. I said, both of us have a similar role in this organization. Both of us are discharging our professional competencies and earning our livelihood. The only two things which separate you and me, possibly I was lucky, I was born in the right family, in the right environment, and or I worked harder than you.
And gratitude plays a great role in synchronicity.
On this context of tradition, and where we started the discussion with, which is the body-mind, right? Ageless body, timeless mind. Surprisingly, or maybe I have missed out, in this entire concept of body-mind, there's one concept which is at the cusp that I don't think you've written about much or spoken about much. What's your view on that and importance of that? The concept in the relationship, love, does sex appear somewhere there? Is it important?
No, I wrote about sex and spirituality in my book, The Path to Love. Mm-hmm. And sexual pleasure is part of our existence. If you look at the four goals of life, Artha, Kama, Dharma, Moksha. Kama is not karma, it's Kama is pleasure. But pleasure in the context of meaning, purpose, love, and values. So when sexual experience is in the context of love, and love not as a mere emotion, but love as the ultimate truth at the heart of creation, which is there's no subject-object split, where the lover and the beloved become one, when the seer and the scenery become one, when the knower and the knowledge become one.
That's very esoteric.
Sometimes seems to be, but it's part of...
I know, but somewhere...
That's true spirituality.
So the coming to that concept of sex...
In that context, by the way, sexuality is not... profane, it's sacred.
Yeah, but then why is it such a taboo? Like, for instance, I've heard a lot of doctors, family therapists, etc. I've heard them saying that no, one meal with the family is very important, exchange of ideas. So one of the doctors I've asked that, have you ever written in your prescription that how often sex is important in a love relationship? Why have we made this concept which is so integral in our nature?
Religions thrive on guilt.
Come again?
Religions assume power through institutionalized guilt.
Right. And I have a different perspective, if I may say so. It might be a radical thought. It might raise lots of eyebrows. I believe that this is one of the ploys which the men applied against women.
It's true.
They stigmatize sex. Sex is nothing but procreation, because the moment it is pleasure, then the women possibly hold unlimited power. We have seen it in Eleanor of Troy, we've seen it in Ramayana, Mahabharata. So the custodian of religions interpreted and made it a taboo.
It's called power mongering, influence peddling, cronyism, and corruption.
And coming back to that storytelling, doctor, I think that's where I come back there. I've been observing it very carefully. I've been observing the degeneration of a society, moving away from whatever you are saying, that awareness, spirituality. I think as a whole, and in societies like us, which is a scarcity society, where you are always facing the pressure of your livelihood, you need to do the things that you must do. You wake up in the morning and you start struggling, you start fighting, because we don't have anything which is enough for everyone. So if I confiscate it, if I get it before you, you don't get it. That's a norm of a scarcity society, where I think the soft power plays a role. Doc, you have written many books. Most of them are New York Times bestsellers. There are a lot of followers. If possible, I would urge you to come back to this fiction storytelling. You are also absolutely sold on the idea of story. You tell a story. There are people who would accept it. So would you just look at that? And today with this OTT world, the stories are no more. We just had an award in Bengali on a Bengali channel. We called it a Ghore Bioscope Award, which is basically home theater. The theater has reached your drawing room in last exactly 100 years back. John Bade started experimenting with television. So I think soft power has reached every drawing room. So may I urge you to look at that a little more keenly and hone your, I'm sure that's your passion, writing stories.
I write historical fiction. So right now I have actually some books that are in the process of making films. The Return of Merlin is going to be a film. Soulmate is going to be a film.
They are in the context of
production, and then there's historical fiction.
So Beacon Media would be doing that?
Beacon Media is part of. They're doing a few books of mine, but I have historical fiction on the life of Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad, which is a little controversial right now, but I have done a lot of fiction, and
So you're based on historical fictions. That's your focus. You not really original fiction.
Well, no. Return of Merlin was a very contemporary novel. Soulmate is a very contemporary novel. The Way of the Wizard is a very contemporary novel.
Anything in the Indian context that you have?
Buddha is
so that's historical, but
it's fiction.
It's fiction.
Historical fiction. So I fill in the gaps with imagination.
Brilliant. So that, has anybody taken that up to be converted into?
It's now being it's optioned to FX TV in the United States.
So the next one you write in the Indian context, I do have to have an opportunity to have that as an option for us to convert them into fiction stories in India.
So, yes.
And finally, Doctor, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I'm sure that you read minds. You are all about the brain chemistry. If you have anything specific for me that I'll take away as
progressive realization of worthy goals, number one. Number two, the ability to love and have compassion. And number three, self-awareness. That's it.
Right. So I need to do whatever I've been doing more and more. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.